The Fountain of Remembrance, Guardians of Time. Previously, on Romance on the High Seas, Alexander and Helena followed the impossible fawn, the one bearing a spiral of white markings on its right flank, exactly as the ancestor had promised in the dream, while the transforming snow lulled their companions to sleep within the protective circle traced by the adult doe. Separated from the others, the two pressed onward toward the north of north. Not the geographical north a compass would indicate, but the spiritual north that intuition recognized as more real than any coordinate. The melody Helena hummed without knowing its origin, the very one the ancestor had intoned in Alexander's dream, quickened the fawn's pace, as though the song were a password confirming authenticity, final proof that those who followed were not imposters, but true heirs of lineages converging across centuries. And the vibration Alexander had begun to feel in his bones, not sound, but a frequency the blood recognized before the mind could name it, grew with every step toward the heart of the mystery. Excalibur was not sleeping, it was waiting. In this new episode, we shall discover together how Alexander and Helena will follow the mystical fawn to the entrance of an ancestral grotto. And what awaits them on the other side is no cave, but a portal, a veil between what is and what was, a threshold where time curves back upon itself like a river meeting its own source. Within, the Fountain of Remembrance will reveal Excalibur resting in luminescent depths that answer to none of the laws of physics either of them has ever studied. In the silent presence of Alexander's ancestor, a warrior whose eyes carry centuries of battles won and an existential anguish no victory has ever resolved, the couple will discover a truth that reorganizes everything they believed they knew. The sword does not choose the strongest, but the one who has learned to vibrate at the frequency of justice, tempered by compassion. Helena will witness, in a vision she did not ask for and will not be able to share at once, the destiny of a distant descendant wielding Excalibur in an age of absolute shadow. And Alexander will undergo the one training no previous battle could ever have given him, learning to surrender so completely to himself that the separation between seeker and sought dissolves, and the sword recognizes in the blood of the one who calls it the echo of the warrior who once kept it. The summons through the snow. The snow that fell was not the same snow of the path ascending, and the fawn ahead of them knew that they would know this. There was something different in the quality of the flakes, not in their temperature, not in their size, not in the speed with which they fell, but in the quality of attention they carried with them, as though each crystal had been sent not by the weather, but by something that wished the path to remain marked for those two alone. The fawn moved with a grace that defied the logic of every animal Alexander had ever known. Hooves barely grazing the snowed surface, movement that was more dance than walk, as if gravity had struck a specific agreement with that creature to not apply itself with the same rigor it applied to everything else. The wind blew through the trees in patterns that were almost language, not words the conscious mind could translate, but sounds that resonated in the chest with the specific quality of things that have been heard before, in another time, in another body, by another version of oneself that the blood still remembered having been. It was as though the mountain itself observed them, not with the indifference of geography, but with the attention of one awaiting a long return. Helena felt something familiar in that landscape with the disconcerting specificity of memories that do not belong to the present life, yet arrive with the vividness of lived experience. The snow-laden trees, the arrangement of the rocks, the way the light filtered through the bare branches casting silver patterns across the white ground, all of it echoed not a specific memory, but the texture of a memory, like recognizing someone's voice before remembering where that voice was heard. And then, with the sudden clarity of revelations that arrived not gradually, but all at once, she understood. This place carried the same quality of presence as the place where she had first encountered Edith. Not the same geography, but the same energy, as though there existed points in the world where the veil between the visible and the invisible was naturally thinner, and those points recognized one another across distances that no map could record. Was it sacred geometry? A divine pattern weaving each encounter into a mandala of purpose? Or was it simply that certain places in the world had absorbed so much of certain qualities of intention that they had begun to emit them, like wood that absorbs the fragrance of incense burned decades before and still releases it when warmed? Alexander noticed the change in Helena's expression, that specific reflective stillness he had learned to recognize not as the absence of thought, but as the presence of thought denser than usual. Attention turned inward with an intensity that rendered the exterior temporarily translucent. He too felt something different in that place, though of a distinct nature. Where Helena felt recognition, he felt anticipation, like a soldier who reaches the vantage point from which he can finally see the battle awaiting him, and discovers that the terrain he had imagined differs from the real terrain. Yet the difference does not diminish his determination to face it. It only makes that determination more precise. His trained eyes swept the ground not in search of physical dangers. He had understood, over the course of the journey, that the perils of Thule did not arrive by the routes a warrior's training taught one to watch, but in search of signs. Then, as the sun began to tinge the sky in hues that were simultaneously and impossibly rose and gold, he saw the thread of water. It trickled from an opening in the rock ahead, winding through the snow like a vein of liquid silver, and it did not freeze. What should have frozen instantly in that temperature remained liquid with the stubbornness of things that obey laws different from those the surrounding environment imposes upon everything else. Its sound was musical with that specific quality of music that was not composed, but that emerged, not from an instrument, but from a place's intention to be heard. The grotto from which the water emanated was partially concealed behind curtains of ice and snow, yet its presence was unmistakable, marked by an aura of sacredness that made the air around it vibrate with expectancy. The fawn stopped before the entrance, turned toward the couple with those eyes that carried more understanding than any animal ought to carry, and then, without hesitation, without ceremony, with the absolute naturalness of one fulfilling a function always fulfilled, stepped into the darkness of the grotto and vanished like a shooting star that instead of falling, ascends. And to you who accompany this crossing, who enter with us this territory, where time curves back upon itself and where the blood keeps memories the mind could never access on its own, I leave a simple but essential request. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comment sharing what you feel, what you see, what this narrative awakens in depths where reason seldom reaches. Every gesture of yours is a flame added to others, strengthening the invisible current that unites hearts across time and the mysteries that await revelation. In doing so, you do not merely support this work. You become part of the tapestry of light we are weaving together, word by word, episode by episode. The story continues, but it is your presence that keeps the fire alive. Alexander and Helena exchanged a look that required no words, for they had reached the point where words would have been redundant, where the language they had developed together throughout the journey was made of shared time and co-made choices, not of syllables. Their hearts beat in the same rhythm, not metaphorically, but with that genuine physiological synchronization that emerges between people who have shared enough tension for their bodies to begin co-regulating, holding each other's hand, feeling the warmth of connection pass through their interlaced palms with the concreteness specific to things more real than any abstraction. They took the first step toward the grotto. The entrance enveloped them in that darkness which is not the absence of light, but the presence of something else. A quality of space that exists in dimensions the eyes were not trained to perceive. For one brief instant, everything was absolute black. Then the eyes adjusted, and what they began to see was no cave. It was a portal. They were not entering a place. They were crossing a threshold between what is and what was, between the tangible present and the past, eternally preserved in the invisible archives of time. And there was no way of knowing, having crossed that threshold, what would be found on the other side. What existed was only the certainty that what awaited them had been waiting long enough for the waiting itself to have become part of its nature. The temporal veil. The faun had disappeared with the completeness of things that fulfill their purpose, and, having fulfilled it, no longer require a visible form in order to continue existing. The interior of the grotto pulsed with a luminosity that had no apparent source, not a reflection of external light, not the bioluminescence of any organism known to biology, but an emanation that rose from the very substance of the walls, as if the rock had absorbed millennia of intention and was now returning it in the form of blue emerald light that illuminated not only the physical space, but the very perception of those who stood within it. The air was dense with a humidity that was not merely physical. It was like breathing not only oxygen, but liquid memories, fragments of lives lived millennia ago that the place had kept with the specific fidelity of archives that have never been consulted, and that, for that very reason, preserve everything in unaltered perfection. The sound of the water was amplified by the rock walls, creating a symphony that reverberated not only through their ears, but through their bodies, making each cell vibrate at the frequency of that sacred place. And Helena recognized, with that disconcerting clarity of understandings that arrive before they are fully processed, that it was the same frequency she had heard in the stream on the beach. Thule was consistent. Thule was deliberate. As they advanced, following the course of the thread of water that widened into a crystalline brook, the reality around them began to oscillate in a way that was not visible. It was felt. Like walking through invisible layers of time, passing through transparent membranes that separated one era from another, each layer carrying a slightly different quality of air, a slightly different quality of gravity, as though each age possessed its own specific weight that the bodies of those who crossed it could detect even when the eyes identified nothing. Alexander felt an expansion in his chest with that quality that is not comfortable, but that is necessary. The heart growing beyond the limits of the physical body, connecting with something far greater, far older, something that had existed before the name he carried and that would continue existing long after that name was forgotten. The walls of the grotto seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting gently, and in fleeting moments, images projected themselves across the rocks. Ancient warriors, sacred rituals, celebrations and laments, all coexisting simultaneously in that space that did not obey the linear sequence time normally imposes. As if the past were not past here, only present with different dates. Then, without warning, the grotto opened. The chamber it revealed was majestic with the majesty that requires no ornamentation to assert itself, a grandeur that comes from scale and the quality of silence, not from decoration. At its center, illuminated by light with no apparent source, stood the fountain of remembrance. It was no ordinary spring, it was a liquid portal into the depths of time, a living mirror that reflected not merely images, but essences. The water rose from the rocky floor with hypnotic softness, forming a perfectly circular pool whose edges appeared to have been sculpted with a precision that comes not from tools, but from intention repeated across enough time for that intention to become, itself, a tool. The liquid was crystalline to the point of being nearly invisible. And at the bottom of the fountain, at a depth that defied the laws of physics either of them had ever learned to trust as constants, rested something that made the air escape from both their lungs in a breath that was not merely surprise, but recognition, the encounter of those who finally see with their own eyes what they had seen only with their blood. Excalibur. The legendary sword lay in the bed of the fountain, emanating a luminescence entirely its own, transforming the water around it into a kaleidoscope of silver and golden reflections. It bore no rust, no sediment that centuries of submersion ought to have deposited, On the contrary, it shone with the specific purity of things that exist outside of time, and that for that reason do not age the way things that exist inside time age. The blade pulsed with a life of its own, its brightness intensifying and fading in a rhythm that echoed a heartbeat, yet not that of any single human heart, but of a far greater, far slower heart, the heart of something that had existed before any human heart had ever learned to beat. Helena felt tears form in her eyes with that specificity of tears that do not come from sorrow or from joy, but from encountering something that exceeds entirely every emotional category available, that touches the soul so directly that the body responds before the mind can organize a more sophisticated reply. But they were not alone. At the edge of the fountain, with his back turned to them, stood a human figure, a tall man, broad-shouldered, wearing a tunic that appeared to be made of material Alexander's memory could not classify. Not linen, not leather, not anything he had ever seen before, but something that combined the texture of the first with the luminescence of the night sky, as though the fabric had absorbed so much of the place that it had become part of the place itself. His hair was long and dark, bound in a warrior's braid with the specific functionality of one who wears long hair, not for aesthetics, but for a tradition that has reason to exist. And even without seeing his face, Alexander felt something that was not akin to recognition. It was recognition, with all the immediate and irrational certainty the word contains. The man stood motionless, contemplating the sword in the depths of the fountain, with an intensity that suggested not momentary contemplation, but a vigil spanning centuries, the posture of one who is not thinking about what he beholds, but being defined by it, a relationship in which the object and the guardian have become inseparable across enough time for the distinction to have lost all meaning. Alexander tried to speak, tried to announce his presence, and discovered that his voice produced no sound whatsoever. Helena also moved her lips. Silence. They existed in a parallel dimension, capable of seeing but not of being seen, capable of witnessing but not of interacting through the physical channels that normally mediate human communication. Or perhaps, Alexander thought with a shiver of understanding that ran the full length of his spine, they had not yet fully materialized in that plane of existence. They were between worlds, between times, suspended in a temporal limbo where past and present coexisted without entirely touching. Like two circles that partially overlap, the area of overlap being this specific space, this specific chamber, this specific moment. The ancestor, and Alexander knew, with every fiber of blood coursing through his veins, that that man was his direct forebearer, the nameless warrior whose legend Nevam had narrated, whose story had been transmitted across centuries until it arrived in the dream that had prepared him for this encounter, remained unaware of their presence, submerged in a contemplation that had endured longer than any contemplation should ever have been able to endure. Eternal guardian of a secret that was on the verge of being revealed, not because the time had come by accident, but because it had been woven to arrive precisely thus, precisely now. The awakening of the ancestral consciousness. Excalibur's brightness began to intensify with the deliberate gradualness of things that know they are being observed and that respond to attention with more of themselves. The luminescence emanating from the submerged blade grew until the entire chamber seemed to be contained within a rising star. Not heat, not radiation that burned, but light that revealed with that specific quality of revelation that does not assault, yet no longer permits one to pretend not to see what is being shown. With it, details previously hidden in the shadows emerged. Ancient symbols carved into the walls with the precision of one who carved not to decorate, but to transmit. Runes that pulsed with meaning of their own, as though the carving had been made in a material that absorbed intention and returned it as light. Crystals that captured and refracted the radiance in geometric patterns of such particular beauty that it seemed impossible they could be accidental. The water of the fountain began to vibrate. not with physical undulations the eyes would detect, but with energetic oscillations that Alexander and Helena felt in their bones, with that certainty of perceptions that arrive before any conscious processing. It was as if the sword itself were communicating through the primordial language of frequency, speaking directly to the essence of the universe, and as if the universe, recognizing the idiom, responded with attention. The ancestor raised his head abruptly, not slowly, not with the cautious deliberation of one who reasons through his actions, but with the immediacy of instincts that had been trained by decades of combat to function faster than any conscious thought could intercede. There was a presence there, two presences. His senses, honed by a lifetime of situations where detecting before being detected was the difference between living and not living, had never deceived him. He turned slowly, and this time, the slowness was deliberate, the slowness of the warrior who knows that what he will find demands not urgency, but wholeness of attention. His eyes swept the chamber with an intensity that was reading, not surveillance, seeking forms, shadows, any indication of what his deepest senses insisted was present. And Alexander felt the weight of that gaze pass through him like an invisible blade. It was like looking into a mirror distorted by time, with that specific effect that is not distortion by imperfection, but distortion by perspective. The same face seen from an angle no mirror of the present could offer. The features were unmistakably similar, the same strong bone structure, the same line of the jaw, the same shape of the eyes that Alexander had spent his entire life seeing without truly seeing, because they are the eyes with which one looks, not the eyes one looks at. But there were striking differences, not of structure, but of content. The ancestor carried in his face the marks of a life lived under the weight of responsibilities that Alexander was only beginning to understand. His eyes, deep and dark as wells of wisdom that had taken decades to excavate, had witnessed horrors no man ought to see, but also moments of grace and beauty that elevated the human spirit above any horror previously witnessed. There was a scar that crossed his left eyebrow with the specific narrative of scars that were not given by carelessness, but in a moment when attention was elsewhere because something more important demanded it. And above all, above any physical detail Alexander could catalog, there was a nobility that was not of social standing, but of choice. The specific nobility of those who could have chosen otherwise and who, each and every time, chose the path that cost more. The light of Excalibur continued to grow until it reached the point where the entire chamber seemed to exist within a clarity that was more real than reality. And in that moment of maximum luminosity, the impossible occurred. The ancestor saw Alexander and Helena, not with his physical eyes, which still showed only stone and water and sourceless light, with that other vision that all warriors who survive long enough develop, the perception that reaches beyond the physical senses because the physical senses alone are not sufficient to survive what the world holds in reserve for those who persist. They materialized before him like ethereal apparitions, semi-transparent, existing between existence and non-existence, with that specific quality of those who belong to another temporal plane, yet are sufficiently present to be perceived by one who has the sensitivity for veils. The ancestor showed no surprise. Warriors of his caliber had learned, at the cost of experiences that had transformed them forever, that the universe was far vaster and more mysterious than any mortal mind could fully comprehend. He had learned to respect what he did not completely understand. He had learned that wonder was not a sign of weakness, but of intelligence. Only the limited presume to know everything. He simply observed them with a calm that came not from indifference, but from recognition. This was a moment of temporal confluence, one of those rare instants when the river of time forms eddies, allowing different eras to briefly touch before the current resumes its separate course. Alexander tried to speak again, and this time he felt something different. It was not sound that emerged, but pure thought. Communication that required no air, no vibration, none of the physical intermediaries that normally mediate the transmission of intention between human minds. Helena too perceived the opening. She extended invisible filaments of light across the temporal abyss, connecting not words, but essences, descendant to ancestor across the centuries that separated them, with the specific inevitability of connections that were not chosen, but that existed before any choice, and that no choice could ever entirely undo. What the ancestor returned was not a sequence of words that could be transcribed. It was a torrent of sensations and understandings. His valor, not as an abstract concept, but as a living force that had been tested on 1,000 battlefields, forged in the heat of combat, where a single moment of hesitation meant death, penetrated Alexander with the intimacy of a memory that was not his own, yet that he recognized as though it were. He saw through the ancestor's eyes dozens of battles won, companions fallen, sacred oaths sworn beneath stormy skies that bore witness because there was no one else left to do so. But he also felt something darker, deeper, an existential anguish that gnawed at the ancestor's soul like a wound no victory had ever fully healed, because the wound was not of the sword, but of understanding. The truth about peace and power. The ancestor's anguish had roots deeper than any battle lost. It was the anguish of one who had won every battle and understood that winning was not enough. He had fought his entire life for peace with that total seriousness of those who do not fight for peace as a concept or as a legacy or as recognition, but because they had seen what the absence of peace did to specific people in specific moments and had decided they would no longer tolerate being inert witnesses. He had shed blood, his own and that of countless enemies, to create a world where children could grow up without knowing the specific horror the eye learns when it sees unnecessary violence for the first time. And he had succeeded. For a time, he had established treaties, forged alliances, united tribes that had previously destroyed one another with the dedication of enemies who know exactly how to hurt each other because they have known each other long enough. But as the years passed, he had observed with growing despair, that specific despair of those who love humanity enough to continue being disappointed by it, how the peace that had cost so much to establish began to be corroded from within, undermined not by external enemies who could at least be identified and confronted, but by human nature itself, which seemed to carry within it a tendency that no external victory could ever fully extirpate. Alexander and Helena absorbed these understandings directly, without need for verbal translation. They saw the ancestors' memories as if they were their own, but with the specific distance of another's memories that allows one to see the pattern that whoever is inside the pattern cannot entirely see. They watched the wheel turning, victory celebrations that slowly transformed into feasts of excess, allies who became rivals not through betrayal, but through the gradual erosion of purpose, idealists who became despots replicating the very same structures of domination they had sworn to destroy, not out of conscious hypocrisy, but because power has a corrosive quality that works slowly, that erodes not from the outside in, but from the inside out, so gradually that those being corroded rarely perceive the process until the erosion has advanced too far to be reversed without immense cost. For in the heart of peace, the ancestor transmitted, his telepathic voice carrying the weight of 8 decades of observing this specific law functioning with the implacability of physics. Like a malignant seed awaiting only the right conditions, there is always born someone whose heart is more inclined toward power than toward service. The desire for power inevitably paves the road to arrogance, and from arrogance to oppression is merely the step that arrogance had already prepared before any conscious decision was made. It is for this reason, the ancestor continued his transmission with that specific intensity of revelations that had arrived after sufficient waiting for the patience of transmitting them to have become part of the transmission itself. That time and again, The forces that govern the greater balance grant men enough time to find the peace that is contained within every beating heart. That peace lies not in written treaties or in well-defended borders. It resides in the capacity of each individual soul to recognize the divine in itself and in the other. But when men allow blindness to obscure their hearts, when they choose the illusion of separation over the truth of unity, when the ego cries louder than consciousness, only the sword remains. A pause carrying the weight of a sentence delivered not with satisfaction, but with the specific weariness of one who would be glad to be wrong. Excalibur is not merely a weapon of war. It is an instrument of cosmic balance, a corrective force that emerges when humanity strays so far from its true path that only dramatic intervention can restore what gradual erosion has destroyed. Helena felt a shiver run the full length of her spine as she received this revelation, not from fear, but from understanding. The sword was simultaneously blessing and curse, symbol of hope and of terror, proof that the universe cared what happened to humanity, and proof that this care could assume forms any sensible person would have preferred to be unnecessary. When Excalibur, wielded by the Chosen One, cuts through illusion, the ancestor transmitted with a gravity that made the air denser around the words, "No irredeemable transgressor shall be spared, no matter how high they have risen, no matter how many layers of protection they have built." The sword does not punish arbitrarily. It simply reveals and materializes the consequences that already existed in potential, bringing forth the judgment that would otherwise take generations to manifest. It is divine justice in its purest and most terrible form. Pure because it is uninfluenced by vanity or fear or convenience. Terrible because the purity of justice, without the softening that human imprecision inevitably introduces, is more absolute than anything mortals are capable of executing. The revelation hung in the air of the chamber with that specific quality of truths that do not ask to be believed because they simply are, and that await only for those who hear them to be sufficiently ready to receive their weight without that weight distorting them. The warrior's compassion. The sorrow that grew in Alexander's chest as he absorbed these revelations was not weakness. It was the specific sorrow of greatness that understands the cost of everything that has value. It was not fear for himself, nor anxiety about what he would need to do or what the future would demand. It was that existential grief for humanity as a whole. The anguish of one who understands that beings endowed with such potential for love and creation could also fall into abysses of cruelty so deep that dramatic purification becomes necessary. It was the sorrow of one who loves enough not to be deceived, to look at what is with a honesty that neither easy optimism nor defensive pessimism permits. That clean, unprotected vision that only the truly courageous hearts can sustain. His eyes, still fixed upon the ancestor through the trembling layers of reality distorted by time, betrayed this sorrow without attempting to conceal it, because he had reached the point in the journey where concealment would have been an insult to what he felt, and what he felt deserved to be completely honored. The ancestor perceived it immediately. And it was precisely through that sorrow that he recognized the true greatness dwelling in the heart of his descendant. Because only genuinely noble souls carry the weight of another's suffering without transforming it into justification for hardening, without converting pain into a protective distance that prevents the next pain from reaching as deep. The energy emanating from Alexander was of peace, not of war, of defending the vulnerable, not of conquering power, of serving those in need, not of accumulating glory for himself. It was the mark of the true guardians, those rare beings who wield power not because they desire it, but because the responsibility has been entrusted to them, and who would gladly carry that burden to the end of their days if it meant protecting those who cannot protect themselves. This perception softened the ancestor's expression with that tenderness that is not sentimentality. It is the recognition that what stands before one is real and worthy. "Calm your hearts," he transmitted, with a gentle strength that seemed to envelop the couple like an embrace that transcended the physical impossibility of contact between beings of different eras. "It will not be in your time that the sword passes purifying the earth. You will not witness the days when Excalibur rises against the darkness that has grown beyond what ordinary light can reach. That task is reserved for a more distant age, when the shadow will have grown so vast that the light itself will seem to have been banished from the world." The revelation brought partial relief, but relief that was, at the same time, an expansion of understanding. For if they were not the bearers of the final justice, they were the guardians of hope, those who would keep the flame of possibility burning through turbulent times, preparing the path so that, when the inevitable moment arrived, the sword could fulfill its destiny with the bearer being shaped across the generations that would come after them. "When the time of the great purification comes," the ancestor continued, each word weighted with the solemnity of revelations that had been kept for centuries awaiting the right recipients. "When the sword finally awakens from its rest and travels to the distant future, it will know no rest until the last irreparably rooted evil has been removed from the garden of the earth. It will be a total cleansing, absolute, without compromise or hesitation, because hesitation is what allows the shadow to re-establish itself before the cleansing is complete." Helena, who had been processing each word with that attentiveness that costs more than passive listening, felt a knot form in her throat as she contemplated this future reality. Part of her wanted to question, wanted to argue that there was surely a less absolute path, but in the depth of her soul, where the most fundamental truths reside beyond the reach of the ego and its comforting illusions, she knew that the ancestor was articulating a law that operated with the same indifference to individual preferences with which the law of gravity operates: real, consistent, non-negotiable. And there was a strange peace in understanding this, not the peace of resignation, but the peace of alignment with what is real, rather than of conflict with what one would prefer to be real. And only after that cleansing, the ancestor concluded with words that carried as much warning as promise, as much weight as hope. "When the last vestige of irreparable corruption has been removed, when the earth has been made ready once more for a new cycle of spiritual growth, only then will the sword return to its eternal rest. It will come back to this very place, to these sacred waters, to sleep until the cycles of existence again demand its awakening. For Excalibur belongs to no specific age. It belongs to all ages and to none, existing outside the linear flow of time, a timeless constant that emerges only in the moments of greatest need, at the inflection points where the destiny of all humanity hangs in a balance that no human hand alone could ever set right." The question of the bearer. The weight of the revelations hung in the air like a dense mist of meaning, and within it, a question took shape with the inevitability of questions that must be asked before anything else can occur. Alexander felt himself simultaneously small before the magnitude of what he had discovered and expanded by the honor of being part of a lineage so sacred, of a mission that transcended the narrow limits of a single life. But a pressing question was forming with that urgency of practical questions that insist on existing even in the midst of the most elevated revelations. How would they carry the sword back? And more importantly, who would wield it when the time of the purification the ancestor had revealed finally came? Through the telepathic connection that flowed with growing fluidity, Alexander projected his concern. The ancestor remained silent for a long moment, his eyes turning once again to Excalibur resting in the bed of the fountain. That specific gaze of a guardian contemplating what he has kept long enough for the distinction between guardian and guarded to have become porous. When he answered, the response was at once simple and laden with implications that would unfold only with time. "You will carry it to the druid. He will know what to do." But before Alexander could formulate his next question about the final bearer of the distant age, something extraordinary happened to Helena. Her eyes were drawn to the sword at the bottom of the fountain with an irresistible force. Not curiosity she might have resisted, but a compulsion deeper than any conscious deliberation could counter. The world around her dissolved with that dissolution that is not gradual but sudden, like clarity that yields to a vision that is clear in a different way. Helena found herself submerged in a vision of such intensity that it was like living the future she beheld with every sense, not static images on an inner screen, but a living, pulsing reality with smells and sounds and temperature and texture, as real as the ground beneath her feet, perhaps more real because it came charged with prophetic truth that transcended the illusions of common existence. The vision revealed a battlefield beneath a sky darkened by smoke and ash, with that specific darkness that is not of night, but of combustion on a scale that alters the very air one breathes. The smell of blood and burning metal was physical. Helena felt it as though she were there, and the sound of thousands of voices in agony and fury created a cacophony that tears the very fabric of reality with that quality of the sounds of mass violence the human ear was never designed to process without consequence. From the center of this apocalyptic chaos emerged the figure of a young man, still young, but prematurely marked by the scars of battles that had found him too early for experience to have arrived before the damage. His body was covered in blood, both his own and that of his enemies, and his armor was dented and broken in places that told the story of blows he had survived and that others would not have. But in his hands, held with a determination that defied physical exhaustion and spiritual despair, was Excalibur, shining with that light that seemed to be the only source of true clarity in that entire landscape of darkness. Helena recognized something fundamental in that bloodied warrior. Not his face, obscured by chaos and distance, but something deeper. The specific pattern of how he carried the weight he carried. The quality of presence that emanated from him even amid exhaustion. It was her blood, one of her descendants, born of her lineage in a future she would not live to see, yet for which she was in this very moment preparing the way. She saw how he fought not for glory or conquest, but with that terrible necessity of one who knows that not fighting would be worse than any cost of fighting. Each blow of Excalibur cutting not only flesh and bone, but the very chains of oppression that had enslaved millions. The work of an entire generation of corruption undoing itself blow by blow. Accumulated karma manifesting with the acceleration that only sacred intervention could produce. The horror of the vision lay not in the violence itself, it lay in what the violence represented. The collective failure of humanity to choose, time and again across generations, the path that would have rendered all of it unnecessary. She could feel the emotional weight her descendant carried, the anguish of having to kill so many, even knowing that they themselves had chosen the path that had brought them to that point. She saw the doubt that flickered in his eyes between blows. Will I survive this? Will I see the dawn of a new world? His face expressed the specific horror of one who knows intimately the price of justice, of one who understands that even the most necessary victory leaves scars upon the soul of the victor that no victory can erase. And then the ancestor intervened, his mental presence cutting through the prophetic turbulence with the urgent gentleness of hands reaching for someone who is drowning. He will survive. Your descendant will fulfill his mission and live to see the fruits of his sacrifice. He will live a long life, and when death finally comes, it will be of old age, in peace, in his own chambers, surrounded by those he loves, in a world he helped to purify. That is the destiny the threads of time are weaving for him. And the relief Helena felt upon receiving that confirmation was as physical as any sensation she had experienced throughout the entire journey, like breathing after too long without air. The unshared mystery. Helena emerged from the vision as one emerges from very deep waters, breathless, her eyes still reflecting images of the distant future, her body trembling slightly with the impact of having glimpsed the threads of destiny, weaving patterns across generations not yet born. Alexander, who had remained at her side throughout the entire vision without understanding what she was experiencing, held her by the shoulders with the specific care of one who knows that what occurred was real but does not know its nature, the care of one who respects what he cannot fully see. His eyes sought hers with a question that was at once urgency and willingness not to ask if not asking was what she needed. And Helena, processing the vision that still reverberated within her with the specific intensity of experiences the body requires time to fully integrate, shook her head in a gesture barely perceptible that was answer entire. Not now. There was reason for the silence, and the reason was wisdom, not calculation, but deep instinct that guided her to keep certain knowledge within the inner sanctuary of the soul until its revelation could serve the highest purpose. Helena understood, with that certainty of intuitions that arrive before any rational justification, that revealing the specific details of the vision to Alexander at that moment could subtly alter the course of events, creating anxieties or concerns that served no useful purpose for what they needed to do immediately. The future she had seen was so distant that countless variables could still influence its unfolding. To share the image of the bloody descendant, the magnitude of the horror he would face, would be to plant seeds of worry in Alexander that could grow and draw him away from his present mission. The mission that stood before them now, in this chamber, in this encounter with the ancestor who had awaited them for centuries. Some knowledge is a burden that must be carried in solitude, at least for a time, until the right moment for revelation arrives with the naturalness of things that come when they are ready rather than those that are forced before their hour. Alexander, sensing the reluctance and respecting the depth of what Helena had clearly experienced, did not press. Between them existed a trust that transcended the need to know every detail, not the blind trust that is, in truth, a refusal to know, but that other kind, more mature. The trust of one who knows the other well enough to understand that silence also communicates, and that what Helena was keeping was not a secret that separated her from him, but knowledge she was carrying on behalf of them both until the right moment came. This capacity to honor each other's mysteries, to allow spaces of sacred privacy even within the deepest intimacy, not as distance but as reverence, was one of the most unmistakable marks of their truly mature connection. Not all knowledge needs to be immediately shared. Some truths must first be digested by the individual soul before they can be translated into words that others may receive without the translation distorting them. Helena emerged from the vision as one emerges from very deep waters, breathless, her eyes still reflecting images of the distant future, her body trembling slightly with the impact of having glimpsed the threads of destiny, weaving patterns across generations not yet born. Alexander, who had remained at her side throughout the entire vision without understanding what she was experiencing, held her by the shoulders with the specific care of one who knows that what occurred was real but does not know its nature, the care of one who respects what he cannot fully see. His eyes sought hers with a question that was at once urgency and willingness not to ask if not asking was what she needed. And Helena, processing the vision that still reverberated within her with the specific intensity of experiences the body requires time to fully integrate, shook her head in a gesture barely perceptible that was answer entire. Not now. There was reason for the silence, and the reason was wisdom, not calculation, but deep instinct that guided her to keep certain knowledge within the inner sanctuary of the soul until its revelation could serve the highest purpose. Helena understood, with that certainty of intuitions that arrive before any rational justification, that revealing the specific details of the vision to Alexander at that moment could subtly alter the course of events, creating anxieties or concerns that served no useful purpose for what they needed to do immediately. The future she had seen was so distant that countless variables could still influence its unfolding. To share the image of the bloodied descendant, the magnitude of the horror he would face would be to plant seeds of worry in Alexander that could grow and draw him away from his present mission. The mission that stood before them now, in this chamber, in this encounter with the ancestor who had awaited them for centuries. Some knowledge is a burden that must be carried in solitude, at least for a time, until the right moment for revelation arrives with the naturalness of things that come when they are ready rather than those that are forced before their hour. Alexander, sensing the reluctance and respecting the depth of what Helena had clearly experienced, did not press. Between them existed a trust that transcended the need to know every detail, not the blind trust that is, in truth, a refusal to know, but that other kind, more mature. The trust of one who knows the other well enough to understand that silence also communicates, and that what Helena was keeping was not a secret that separated her from him, but knowledge she was carrying on behalf of them both until the right moment came. This capacity to honor each other's mysteries, to allow spaces of sacred privacy even within the deepest intimacy, not as distance but as reverence, was one of the most unmistakable marks of their truly mature connection. Not all knowledge needs to be immediately shared. Some truths must first be digested by the individual soul before they can be translated into words that others may receive without the translation distorting them. The lesson of the sacred vibration. The concept the ancestor was beginning to transmit was, as the deepest truths tend to be, simultaneously simple in its essence and impossible to be fully grasped through instruction, needing to be discovered from within while being taught from without. Everything in the universe vibrates, Alexander. The words arrived through the telepathic connection with that clarity of transmissions that do not pass through the filter of language and that, for this reason, arrive more complete than any verbal exchange could ever allow. Every atom dances at its own frequency. Every thought creates ripples in the ocean of consciousness. Every emotion resonates in specific harmonics that influence the fabric of reality in ways that most people never perceive because they never learned to pay attention to what is always happening around them. But Excalibur vibrates at a frequency that is at once primordial and transcendent. It is the tone of divine justice in perfect equilibrium with celestial compassion. It is the chord of warrior strength tempered by the deepest wisdom. And these two qualities, which humanity so often opposes as though they were incompatible, are here one single thing. Because justice without compassion is not justice. It is cruelty with justification, and compassion without the capacity for justice is not compassion. It is complicity with the comforting illusion that everything is equally acceptable. Alexander closed his eyes, attempting to feel what the ancestor described, and discovered that when he directed his attention not toward the visual brilliance of the sword, but toward the sensation it created in his energetic body, there was something there that had always been there, but that he had never known to seek. A kind of subtle hum that was not exactly sound, yet resembled sound, a pressure that was not physical, but that his consciousness could detect with the specific clarity of things that, once seen, become impossible to unsee. It was as though Excalibur were constantly emitting a single note, a perfect chord existing in every octave simultaneously, from the lowest to the highest, from the most physical to the most spiritual, none of them more real or more important than any other. The challenge was not to hear this vibration. Once he knew where to direct his attention, it was unmistakable. The challenge was to allow his entire being to enter into resonance with it, to synchronize every aspect of himself with that sacred tone until there was no longer any separation between the observer and the observed, between the seeker and the sought. Do not try to force it, the ancestor advised, with the patience of one who spent decades learning the same lessons at the cost of effort that eventually proved to be the very obstacle. The vibration cannot be conquered through brute force, and you are a warrior. Therefore, brute force is your most familiar tool. the one you have used in 1,000 situations where it worked magnificently. But there are conquests that brute force cannot reach because brute force presupposes that what is sought is separate from the one who seeks it, that it must be bent to the will of the conqueror. The vibration of Excalibur can only be found through surrender, an active, conscious surrender in which you release every dissonant frequency you carry. Doubt, fear, selfish ambition, attachment to outcomes, and allow only the purest truth of who you truly are to remain vibrating at your center. Helena, beside Alexander, placed her hand gently on his arm, not to interrupt him, but to offer a point of anchorage, a reminder that he was not alone, even though the work he needed to do was fundamentally solitary, because certain transformations must be accomplished by the individual, yet need not be accomplished without company. Alexander's first efforts were marked by the tension and frustration that were the fingerprint of his training. The warrior's approach learned through the conviction that focused intensity resolves problems. But that approach was precisely what blocked all progress, and the ancestor pointed this out with the specific gentleness of corrections that do not diminish but redirect. A warrior first learns to conquer through strength, he transmitted. But the true master eventually learns that there are conquests that can only be reached through receptivity, through a quality of open presence that allows rather than forces. You cannot fight your way into the vibration of Excalibur. You must court your own soul into opening and resonating naturally with that sacred frequency. It is not about doing something new. It is about ceasing to do the things that prevent what is already there from emerging. Gradually, Alexander began to understand, not as a concept the mind accepts, but as an experience the body confirms. He allowed the tension in his shoulders to dissolve with that specific difficulty of tension that has been held so long. The state of tension has become the state of rest, and relaxation requires a different kind of effort. He allowed his breathing to grow deeper and more natural, allowed the mind to cease its calculating and planning and simply observe. And as he did so, something began to happen. Layers of himself that normally remained hidden began to reveal themselves. Old pains buried with the impatience of one who had no time for them. Fears he had never admitted to carrying because admitting them would have seemed weakness in a context where weakness had a cost. Yearnings for approval disguised as noble ambition because the version of himself that was praised had no room for the version that simply wished to be seen. Each time he identified one of these internal dissonances, instead of fighting it, he simply acknowledged it with compassion and released it, a process that was at once painful and liberating, like removing thorns that had been there long enough to have seemed part of the flesh itself. And then, when Alexander had nearly forgotten that he was seeking something, when his mind had grown so still that it seemed to have merged with the silence around him, when the effort had ceased entirely, not through surrender to failure, but through the understanding that effort was the problem and not the solution, it happened. Subtle at first, a sensation of warmth growing at his center, a quality of lightness that made it seem he might float. And then, like a cosmic switch thrown, Alexander felt his entire consciousness harmonize with something far greater than himself, like 1,000 musical instruments playing at random that suddenly find the same note, creating a chord of such perfect beauty that tears sprang involuntarily from his eyes. He was vibrating. Every cell in his body, every thought in his mind, every emotion in his heart, everything resonating in perfect synchrony with the frequency of Excalibur. The sword at the bottom of the fountain had become an extension of his own expanded consciousness, no longer a separate object, but part of an essence that had always been there waiting to be recognized. The ancestor acknowledged the moment of realization with a smile, the first Alexander had seen on a face so austere and which illuminated those features with that specific quality of joy belonging to those who have waited a long time for something, and who, when it arrives, discover that the waiting was a necessary part of the arriving. "You have reached the resonance," he transmitted with a mixture of pride and relief that revealed he had carried for centuries the hope that this moment would come. But remember, you will not yet speak the sacred name. This part of the journey, learning the vibration, achieving the harmony, is already an immense achievement, a transformation that has permanently altered you. There is one more preparation required, one more layer of readiness that must be reached. At the next encounter, when you return to this state of perfect resonance, and when the external conditions are also aligned, then and only then will you speak Excalibur. And the sword will come to you across the ages, answering the call of one who has earned the right to bear it through genuine transformation. The training between times. What followed was impossible to measure in conventional units of time, not because time did not pass, but because time in that space did not flow in the way that made conventional measurement relevant. To Alexander and Helena, it seemed like hours, perhaps days, in the sacred chamber beyond time, as Alexander integrated and consolidated the state of resonance he had achieved, working not to deepen it, but to stabilize it, so that it would not be an episodic experience that arrived and departed according to conditions he did not control, but a state he could inhabit with the deliberate choice of genuine skills. In the outer world, only moments were passing, or perhaps no time passed at all, for they were suspended in a dimensional pocket where causality and temporal sequence obeyed different laws. The ancestor remained with them throughout the entire process, silent guardian and patient teacher, not transmitting constant instruction, but present with that quality of presence belonging to those who know that their primary function is not to teach, but to witness, and that the witnessing of someone who understands what is being done is itself a form of teaching that no verbal instruction could ever replace. There were moments when Alexander wanted to give up, when frustration threatened to engulf him with that specific quality of frustrations that form when the effort that always worked fails, when the most reliable tool proves inadequate for the task at hand. In these moments, Helena drew close, not with words of hollow encouragement that acknowledged sincerity without helping, but simply with her solid presence. A reminder that he was not alone, that the journey served something greater than himself, that failing in one moment was not failing in the mission. And the ancestor too offered comfort in his own way, through transmissions of memories of his own struggles, his own moments of doubt when he had been called to tasks that seemed impossible, helping Alexander understand that what he was experiencing was not a sign of inadequacy, but a necessary part of the process. Every great spiritual guardian had passed through similar fire. It was precisely that fire that forged the temper required to carry sacred responsibilities without being destroyed by them. The integration was gradual with that specific gradualness of real transformations, not the sudden drama that stories prefer for being more memorable, but the silent accumulation of micro-changes that create, with time, a difference that retrospective sight finally manages to measure. Alexander learned, not as a concept, but as a bodily skill, the distinction between trying to reach the resonance and inhabiting the state of openness that allowed resonance to arrive of its own accord. It was the difference between trying to hold water and simply becoming the right vessel. The water came not because you forced it, but because you were the right place for it to be. Helena observed Alexander's transformation with that mixture of admiration and growing understanding of one who recognizes a process she herself, in different ways, had undergone. And she wondered about the next steps of her own transformation, about what specific initiation awaited her, about how what she had seen in the vision of the descendant connected with what was being woven now. The vision she had received of the future descendant wielding Excalibur suggested that she had a crucial role, but the details remained wrapped in a mystery that any attempt to force comprehension would only deepen. And when Alexander had reached that specific stability that is not rigidity but rootedness, when the resonance could be inhabited not only in the moments of deepest stillness, but maintained as a constant undercurrent even while the mind was actively engaged with the world, the ancestor transmitted additional instruction that would be the key to the final moment. When the conditions align, when you are in this state of perfect resonance, and when the right time comes according to criteria that you will feel, not know intellectually, there will be a moment of unmistakable recognition, a sensation of rightness like a key turning in a cosmic lock. In that instant of perfect synchronicity, you will speak the sacred name of the sword, and Excalibur will come to you across the ages, not because you pulled it, but because you became the right place for it to be. Seeds of the future. The understanding of what had been experienced began to settle within Alexander like waves reaching the shore, not all at once, but in succession, each one revealing a little more of what the previous had prepared to be revealed. He had not brought Excalibur with him this time, and there was, surprisingly, something close to relief in that, not the relief of a failure avoided, but the relief of wisdom recognized. He had understood that the gradual approach was not an obstacle, but a protection. His body and soul would need time to integrate what he had learned, to stabilize at the new frequency he had reached before taking the final step. Attempting to compress everything into a single moment before the integration was complete would be the same error he had identified at the beginning of the training, using the tool of effort where only genuine readiness could work. The next step, as the ancestor had instructed, would be the druid. And although they did not know exactly how this search would unfold, there was a confidence that was not naivety. It was the specific confidence of one who has passed through enough trials to know that the path opens for those who walk it with genuine intention. Excalibur's radiance began to diminish gradually with that specific slowness of farewells that know there are more encounters to come. Not extinction, but withdrawal. Light retreating into the interior of the blade like a tide receding with the knowledge that it will return. With it, the crystal clarity of the telepathic connection began to grow thinner, the temporal window initiating its closing with the precision of things that open and close according to rhythms that do not consult human convenience. The ancestor remained at the edge of the fountain, his form beginning to grow more translucent, not vanishing abruptly, but receding into the era to which he belonged with the dignity of one who has completed what he came to do. Before the connection broke entirely, he transmitted a final message laden with emotion he had kept carefully contained throughout the encounter. Go in peace, children of the future. Understand that you are part of an unbroken current that extends across the ages. Guardians succeeding guardians, each one doing their part to keep the light burning in times of growing darkness. When you return, seek the druid as instructed. And remember always, the true battle is not against external enemies, but against the darkness that threatens to infiltrate your own hearts. Be beacons of compassion and justice, and teach others to do the same. The vision began to dissolve with that quality of dissolutions that are also transformations, not disappearance, but change of state. The grotto, the fountain of remembrance, the ancestor, everything growing nebulous with the specific velocity of experiences that end not because something failed, but because they completed what they came to do. Alexander felt a gentle pull, like an invisible cord being softly drawn, calling him back to the plane where the physical body waited. Helena held his hand with a force that communicated she too was feeling the transition, and that she was ready, and that she was with him, and that what they had experienced was real and would remain real regardless of the plane on which they found themselves. There was a moment of complete disorientation where they were not entirely anywhere, suspended in the intermediate space where all possibilities exist simultaneously before collapsing into one. And then, exactly as the ancestor had foreseen, in less than the blink of an eye, reality reconfigured itself. Suddenly, they were outside the grotto again, standing in the snow, beneath a sky beginning to darken with the approach of night. That specific darkening of extreme latitudes where night does not fall suddenly, but advances with a slowness that makes it impossible to identify the precise moment when the light yielded definitively. The mountainous landscape stretched before them exactly as they had seen it before entering. The full-branched trees covered in snow, the gentle wind making the boughs sway in that rhythm that is at once random and regular. The contemplative silence of nature that is not quiet, but that is conversing at frequencies most human beings had long ceased to hear. For a moment, both stood motionless, processing, integrating, allowing the experience to find the place within them where it could be kept without being diminished. Alexander looked at his own hands and saw that they trembled slightly, not from cold, but from that specific spiritual exhaustion that comes not from physical effort, but from the intensity of transcendent experience, the body demonstrating that it had been moved by something beyond its habitual scale. Helena was the first to speak, her voice emerging hoarse with that specific hoarseness of voices that have not been used for a long time, but that return with something to say that needs to be said. It truly happened. Not as a question, as a necessity to verbalize the reality of what they had experienced, to make it more integrated into waking consciousness, more available to be carried and used. We saw the past, we spoke with your ancestor, we understood about Excalibur and our purpose. Alexander nodded with that slowness of affirmations that need the time required to be completely true, his eyes still seeking the entrance of the grotto that now appeared to be only a common opening in the rock, stripped of the mystical aura it had carried before. But he knew, with every fiber of his being, that what they had experienced transcended any doubt, not because questioning it was impossible, but because questioning it would be an insult to the weight of what had been received and the depth of the transformation that had occurred. The grotto seemed simple now, not because it had changed, but because he had changed, and things that alter our capacity to see do not look different after the change. We simply see them from a different place. As they began to descend the mountain, their steps careful in the snow that now seemed deeper beneath the diminishing light of day, both carried within themselves something different from what they had carried on the ascent. Not heavier, but denser, more present, more irrevocable. They had gained in that impossible encounter with the past that had been waiting for them, something no leather-bound provision could contain. A profound understanding of their role in the great cosmic tapestry, knowledge of the cycles that govern the sword's awakening, and, more important than any piece of information, Alexander's capacity to vibrate at the sacred frequency that would eventually allow him to call Excalibur across the veil of time. One step remained, a single step that would require the druid, the right moment, the alignment of conditions that time would reveal. And although they did not know exactly when or how, they felt, with that confidence that only develops after sufficient trials have been passed, that the paths would open when the right moment came. For now, it was enough to know that they had been deemed worthy, that they had passed a crucial test, and that the journey, far from ending, was only revealing its deeper layers of meaning. In the shared silence of their descent from the sacred mountain, Alexander and Helena carried not merely memories, but seeds of a future yet to be sown, and which, sown by the right hands at the right moment, would bear fruit in a harvest neither of them would see in its entirety, but which both had helped to make possible. In the next episode, what awaits with the druid is no longer instruction, it is convergence. Everything that has been learned, everything that has been transformed, everything that has been received in the chamber beyond time is about to meet the single point where theory becomes practice, where potential becomes action, where the descendant of Alexandros finally speaks the sacred name with the resonance that the entire journey, from Massalia, from Amesbury, from the silver shore of Thule, from the chamber of the fountain of remembrance, had prepared. But between Alexander and that final moment, there is a druid whose role in the tapestry has not yet been fully revealed, whose wisdom complements what the ancestor transmitted in ways that only the encounter can disclose. And there is Helena, who carries a vision she has not yet been able to share, who holds in silence the destiny of a descendant not yet born, who knows something about the future that will need, eventually, to find its right hour to be spoken. The sword sleeping in the past is growing more awake, and those who have been appointed to call it are, at last, becoming ready.